It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 522 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record, where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. Now, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to it, as well as leave us a review. Really helpful to get your feedback about what we can do to make this an even better, more valuable experience for you. Now, if you'd like to see show notes for this episode, go to andypaul.com/522. That's 522. There you can find our time-stamp breakdown of this and all the conversations here on Accelerate. So make sure you go there and check it out. If there's something you heard during the episode, didn't catch at the time, want to go back and quickly scan where you can find it, that's the resource. andypaul.com/522. Joining me on this show for the first time is Roy Raanani. Roy is the CEO and co-founder of Chorus.ai, which helps improve conversion rates through better conversations. Now, besides being a successful entrepreneur, Roy is a very smart guy about artificial intelligence and AI and sales. And I've had a lot of guests on the show recently who have had some thoughts about AI and the impact it's going to have on your sales life, our sales life. And I have some ideas about this as well. So I thought, why not get an expert on the show to talk about AI and machine learning and help us see where things are really going to go. So, Roy, welcome to Accelerate.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. So, a question I lead off most conversations with these days, standard question is, in your mind, what's the single biggest challenge facing sales reps today?
Oh, wow. That's a big one. Is it sales reps or is it sales teams?
Either way.
Well, I think the single biggest challenge that sales teams face is getting, things are changing so often that the thing that's really going to differentiate you as a team and as an organization is how quickly you learn and how quickly you can get that learning from, the front lines to the top, back to the front lines. Mm-hmm. So how do you actually drive change through to the front lines and make sure that it's happening? Because like anything, I don't believe in a single person or I don't believe in a single way of doing things. I believe in process. And I think with process, you're just continuously learning and trying to push those changes through, seeing if they work, continuously improving. And I just think it's really hard to do today, given how quickly things change, how quickly we release updates to features, how quickly things change in a market with competition, how quickly people change over in an organization. And so just creating that machine that's good at learning and driving change through, I think is really hard these days.
Now, you said to go from the front lines to the top and back to the front lines. So the top meaning what?
Well, in a lot of organizations, initiatives start top down, right? And in sales organizations, I think there's, that's no different. But a lot of the ideas will come from individual managers or individual reps, right? That pick up on something and say, hey,
yes,
we should be doing this.
Right.
And so I think it's just having that communications mechanism where ideas can bubble up to the top. And as an organization, you can say, hey, this is one of the 3 things that we're going to focus on this quarter. And then making sure that you can successfully roll that through the rest of the organization on the front lines.
Got it. Okay. Well, great answer. Okay. So before we jump too much further into it, so tell us a little bit about Chorus.ai. I mean, what was the impetus to start the company? What was the hole in the market you were filling?
Yeah, well, it was a combination of the technology that we need to solve this problem, being in the right place at the right time, and me having some personal experience in sales from 15 years ago when I was putting myself through school. Fundamentally at Chorus, we think that the most important thing that any salesperson does is have a conversation with a prospect, because obviously all of your revenue is built on how you lead those conversations and how they go. And, unless a manager is sitting in on a meeting, there's just no way to know what's going on. And they can't, because they have so many things going on, and a team is having hundreds of meetings every month. And so it just felt like this big gap. Like, is there anything that's so fundamental to the performance of a business that we don't understand and that we're not measuring? And I think outside of the conversations that we're having, I can't think of a better example. And
Sure.
So the idea behind Chorus was, how do we make it easy for you to measure and improve your sales team's performance in meetings? And that was essentially it.
Okay. Well, and that's true. I mean, it's if you're a manager and you ask a sales rep, what happened in this meeting? The recollection is imperfect at best, and it's not a reflection on the individual. It's just that it's our memories are faulty, right? I mean, we don't remember things accurately. Taking notes certainly helps, but short of manually transcribing the conversation, there's things that are missed.
Yeah, and being able to actually roll that up across the organization is a big part of it. So, one of the things that we do is create a dashboard for each rep that gives you really simple metrics about the quality of the conversations that you're having based on things that we've found matter, right? So things like your talk to listen ratio, or things like how many good questions are you asking that's really getting a prospect to surface the information that you need to close a deal, all the way down to the things that are important to you in your sales process. So, it might be something as simple as, you're having a challenge converting trials to paid, and you just want to know, are we having a conversation about success criteria before we kick off trials? And if we do, then does that actually improve our conversion rate? And today, there's actually no way of doing that at scale. And so being able to do that without having to shadow a call is just a different way of managing. And so we're working with companies that are trying to figure out how to make sales a little bit more data driven and get that insight into the conversations.
Well, I think it's not just data driven, at least from my perspective, not just data driven, but it's cause and effect, right? I mean, we've got no shortage of data in sales, but we have a hard time, I think, drawing correlations. And certainly, well, maybe not a hard time drawing correlations. I think it's easy to draw correlations based on confirmation bias, but here, since you actually hear the call, to me, it seems like you get a little bit closer to saying, there's a cause and effect here that we can actually trace.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And actually, I would take it one step further, because one of our philosophies at Chorus is that data for the sake of data isn't helpful. We want to make it actionable for you. And so, one of the pieces of analysis that we did for a customer was around competitors. And they wanted to know, hey, when a competitor comes up in a conversation, does that mean we're doing better or worse, right? Like, what impact does it have? And it's easy to pull that up and identify a correlation. But the more interesting thing that we found was that competitors come up much more often when a rep asks a simple question, right? So I'll put you on the spot. What do you think a question is that could get somebody to talk about competition?
Well, I always ask who else they're talking with.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it turns out that most reps don't actually ask that question consistently, right? And so if you're in a really competitive market, what you're interested in is not, how often are competitors coming up in calls. What you're interested in is, hey, are we consistently asking the question, what other solutions are you looking at? And if you do that, the results actually, kind of make themselves in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we could spend a whole half hour talking just about that question and why that's an important one to ask. So, just moving a step further the company name Chorus, but I always call it Chorus.ai because you've got the extension AI. So obviously it talks about, hints at artificial intelligence. So are you using AI in Chorus? And if so, what's the role of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a lot of marketing hype in AI right now. And so there's a lot of AI in anything. There's a lot of AI in anything that you do. I think that if people, until people see a product that's actually having a conversation for a rep and behaving human, they're going to say it's not real AI. In reality, AI is a type of machine learning, right? And machine learning, when you boil it down, at least, my simple explanation is, how do you learn without having to be explicitly programmed? That's what it is. So it's the type of algorithm that gets smarter with more data. It gets good at identifying patterns. It gets good at predictive tasks. Mm-hmm. And so, you have that as a consumer in your, when you're typing on your smartphone and automatically corrects what you're typing, you're using machine learning. Maybe it's AI, right? Right. If you're speaking to Siri, you're experiencing all of that. And so at Chorus, we're using machine learning and AI from everything from transcription, which is let me listen to a bunch of sounds and figure out what words you're using, which we built in-house, all the way through identifying patterns in your conversations to help you understand what it is about a conversation or a rep that helps them close more deals or advance deals more effectively.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, so well, obviously, when you talk about AI, I mean, a certain segment of the sales population, it sort of strikes fear into their heart, right? Because I think, as you said, to the point, if you get to the point where computers having a conversation, they worry about being replaced, and to me, that seems like that's sort of a meaningless fear. I mean, I see sort of the AI, you certainly are using it in one environment. Other environments, you see it being used to sort of handle a lot of the repetitive tasks that perhaps reps don't need to handle, right? That don't contribute to selling time with a prospect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I was just going to say is, so how do you sort of see it playing out?
Yeah, I think that there are two categories of AI in sales in particular. There are definitely the types of AI that replace. I wouldn't say that they replace humans. They usually replace a very specific task that a human does. So, there's a company called Conversica, for example, and they do something really interesting where they have an AI bot that will automatically and relentlessly follow up on every inbound lead that you have so that you never miss an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, if a lead comes in the middle of the night, or if it's something that's, it's a personal Gmail address and it's whatever, a human's not going to be as aggressive as an AI would. And what the AI can do is, once it sees that there's a signal and it sees that there's engagement, it can then hand it off to a human. And so in that case, we actually are replacing, a human, or at least a part of that inbound SDR's role. And the AI is probably going to be able to do it as effectively, and in some cases more effectively, than a human would.
Well, and arguably, if you look at industry research into lead follow-up, actually, it's probably doing something that most reps don't do, which is actually follow-up.
Exactly. And so there are some specific use cases where I think, the technology really lends itself to what's happening. And then there are some other situations where it's really about, maybe you could call it Iron Man versus RoboCop, right? So Conversica maybe is like RoboCop. It's a machine that's doing a human's job. Whereas Iron Man is, you're actually giving a human a superpower, right? So if I'm a manager, I can't sit in on the 100 conversations that my team is having in a given week, but Chorus can sit in on all those meetings, and it can tell me these are the 3 meetings and the 5 moments that you should listen to in order to be, up to speed. These are the meetings that you should listen to. This is where something interesting happened. And so in that case, you're really just supporting humans in the jobs that they're doing that they don't have as much time for.
I like that image of giving a human a superpower. I mean, that I think is, because I don't really foresee in the near term, even like Conversica, following up on leads, that's great. But at some point, a human needs to intercede, right? And as you said, it's looking for the signal among the noise to say, okay, now it's time to get the human involved. But yeah, the fear, I think you gave 2 good examples. I think the fear of being replaced, I think, is somewhat meaningless, but I like this idea about enhancing the individual and AI doing that. I think that's an exciting future.
Yeah, and there's some really cool companies. I mean, if you look at like at the top of the funnel, right? If you look at a company like DataFox or EverString or Nudge.ai, they're going out there and scanning for all of these signals in the news, in the media, to figure out, hey, here are 5 pieces of information that suggest that this might be a good time to reach out to somebody, mm-hmm. and here's something that you can use to start that conversation. And so again, it's replacing a part of a role, but at the end of the day, you want a human to look at it and figure out, okay, what do I think is going to be most relevant for this person? Let me go use that piece of information. So yeah, I think it'll keep evolving over time, because the other point to make is that we're really in the infancy of this entire AI in sales phase. And in some situations, the data is out there, which makes it easy for an AI to come in and add value. In other cases, like in the case that we're working on, very few people actually even capture their conversation data today. And so, sure. You almost have to take a step back and say, well, what's the data that I think is going to allow me to have an advantage over my competition? And how do I make sure that I have good, clean data so that these algorithms, whether I believe in them today or not, they are going to keep getting better and better and better. And you're going to, you better hope that if that data does matter, that you have something historical that these algorithms can go in and learn from to make you more competitive in the future.
Yeah, and then the whole other layer, which is just how good are the algorithms to begin with, right? So there's an interesting book, I don't know if you've read, by a woman called Kathy O'Neill, called "The Weapons of Math Destruction," and she's a big data person, worked on Wall Street as a quant and a professor in data sciences, but makes the argument that part of the problems we have with our algorithms is that they're designed by humans, right? So there's always this human assumptions that go into forming the basis for the algorithms. So the algorithms themselves obviously have to evolve as well to make an AI achieve its potential.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. So you've been doing some research. It was really interesting, and you provide me some data on this. You've been doing some research using your platform on discovery calls. And so you've analyzed a large number of discovery calls, and I wanted to sort of walk through some of the findings because I thought some really interesting things that popped up. So maybe you could just sort of summarize some of the key findings in your research.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of context overall, we have over 500,000 conversations that have been analyzed by Chorus. And one of the things that we like to do is see if we can find some patterns that are more broadly applicable across different customers. And obviously, I'm a big believer that every buyer is different, every buyer's journey is different, every sale is different. So I try not to paint things with broad brushes. But given how important discovery was, it was we started with the talk to listen ratio, which everybody I think at this point we know, like, hey, it should be a pretty balanced conversation. There's no rocket science there. But what our customers were asking us was, well, telling a rep that they have a bad talk to listen ratio isn't actionable. Because what you need to do is help them figure out, well, how do they get better, right? How do they improve their talk to listen ratio? And obviously it comes down to questions.
Right.
And so we got really curious about, well, what could we discover if we looked into the types of questions that people ask during discovery and demo meetings? And so we looked at that, and what we found was a couple of things. The first one was that although there's a broad distribution, on average, a sales rep asks about 9 questions before they get into the demo.
Okay, so that we're saying, and let's assume that we're talking primarily about inside sales teams. So that was an SDR or SDR and AE or whomever else is tasked to do the demo. In aggregate, they're asking 9 questions.
Yeah, so our customers are primarily account executives. So this is an account executive that's actually doing a discovery with a prospect. Okay.
So they're assuming the discovery precedes the demo, which, again, not always the case, right?
You should hope so.
Right, you should hope so, but trust me, it's not always the case. Okay, so 9 questions before the demo, but that wasn't. It seems like you sort of dug a little bit deeper on that and found that actually perhaps there was a better metric.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because the first question that we had was, well, why is that? Because 9 questions doesn't seem like very much, and so you better make them count. What we found was that not all questions are equal, and so we defined a thing called an engaging question, and an engaging question is a question where the rep asks something open-ended, right, or asks the prospect to elaborate or explain something, and then it gets the prospect to actually talk for an extended period of time. And so what's really great about an engaging question is that it's something that's in the rep's control, which is, did they ask a good open-ended question? But it also gives you an indication of how open the prospect is to sharing information with you. And this was really the big surprising insight, because we found that if you have even one engaging question in a discovery call, your win rate on the deal will increase from 14% to 26% on average for these SaaS customers.
Just on the strength of one engaging question. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, that I'm trying to think about the whole 9 questions. 9 a lot or a little. Yeah, it's so hard to play that back. But yeah, I can see that. Yeah, one good question. I mean, I think that you think about like in the challenger customer, they talk about that one question that you're asking the customer something about their business they should know but don't. Right? I mean, if that's your one open-ended question, that's going to engender quite a conversation.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, an indication that you've done, like, I wouldn't say that if you ask the question, you've made it. It's more that if you can get to a point in a conversation where you've asked something probing and they've really gone on for 20, 30, 40 seconds to describe what they're going through, then it's a good indication that they're a serious buyer, that they're willing to share information with you, and you're going to be able to take that information and do something with it.
So it sort of caused me to think when you said 30, 40 seconds. I mean, is that, looking through all these calls, is that a long response?
It actually is. Yeah. I mean, you're not often going to get too many conversations where, if you look at, we call it the turn length, but where you have a turn length that's over a minute, right? And you hope that you're going to get that early on in the conversation. But sometimes, and this was one of the other things that we found, a lot of sales reps will ask a lot of questions in short succession. And, some managers describe that as almost interrogating a prospect.
Right.
And we actually found that if a rep asks too many questions too quickly, it'll actually shut prospects down. They'll be less likely to get into one of those engaging moments where they're talking for a long time.
That imbalance turns people off, right? Because, people are saying, well, there's a couple things that turns people off. One is, at least in my perspective, in my experiences, when the rep gets into that mode, is they don't understand, right? They don't understand the questions or the value of the questions or the answers they should be receiving. And so they're just asking more questions.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we found, because obviously you want to double click and find examples to understand what's really going on, but a lot of the time what we found was that the really best reps that are asking these engaging questions well, they're starting with the big open-ended questions early on and using them to demonstrate their expertise and understanding of the situation. And all those peppery questions that are more really basic qualifying, you can push those off to the demo, right? You don't have to do them really early on. Like, oh, Andy, how many sales reps do you have? And, what's your target for this year? And, oh, are you using this system or that system and that system or that system? Those are questions that help you as the rep, but they're not going to engage a prospect and they're not going to demonstrate your expertise. And so what we found is that, if you can avoid, those short factual questions early on, and try to push some of them later on into the conversation, you'll get a more engaged prospect.
Now, later on in the conversation, meaning still before the demo, though?
It can be before the demo. It can be during the demo, right? So sometimes you'll be going through the demo and there will be an opportunity to say, here's a place where we can see, where you could break down the performance across your sales reps. By the way, how many reps do you have right now? Oh, okay. And, are you planning on growing this year? Mm-hmm. And so you can just throw in those factual questions during the demo and also make the demo more conversational as opposed to it just being, a one-sided monologue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think that good best practice for discovery is to have those, as you said, start with the bigger open-ended questions. And they really become sort of almost confirmation questions, right? As you start feeding back to the prospect to say, okay, I want to sort of mirror back to you what I think I heard. To me, that's the time where you start throwing in some of these confirmation questions about, size of sales team or, the things that are sort of standard qualification questions that you need to have answered to help you sort of shape the demo, is they fit right in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
We were wondering why some reps feel the need to go into the demo so early, right? Having asked only 9 questions. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I go back to my experience has shown me, and in general, over the years, is the rush to get to the demo is sort of the reason why you want to sort of rush from stage to stage or try to rush from stage to stage is you don't want to be asked something you don't know the answer to, right? You don't want to be exposed as not knowing. See, the thing about asking an engaging question is it's not the first question. It's really the second question you ask that's really the important one. Right? The one that's in response to the answer you get. I mean, you can have a great opening question that they'll talk for 30, 40 seconds, a minute. But it's really to me, it's that next question. That's when you really start getting them to open up. And then they can be a simple question. Or something as easy as, wow, that's really interesting. And what else can you tell me about that?
Yeah, Andy, tell me more about that.
Yeah, or tell me more about that, right? So that suddenly becomes, that's the great thing. But when you open that door, you have to have some understanding of that path they're going to be going down, right? I mean, you're going to learn new things, but if you just sit there sort of a blank look on your face, the customer is going to pick up on that, or a blank look in your face virtually, based on the tone of your voice or whatever. They're going to pick up on that pretty quickly. So, Well, how do I circle back to the question question you asked? What was the question again? Just I'm having a brain.
Yeah, why
a brain moment.
why only 9 questions and then feel this pressure to get to the demo?
Yeah, it gets just back to lack of comfort. And so I think that you see too many reps that just want to short circuit. Okay, I asked the questions. The questions are on my script, and even though the customer may have opened the door to a more in-depth conversation, they say, okay, I fulfilled that requirement. I got to go. And it's not about fulfilling the requirement of asking the questions that are on the script. It's about truly understanding what the customer's needs are.
Yeah, one of the ideas that we had that came from some of our customers that saw their data was, I think that the reciprocity principle.
Yep.
This idea that okay, I've asked you, you've given me some stuff, and now I feel compelled to give something back to you.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the managers that we work with looked at the data and said, I think that sometimes our reps just feel like the easiest thing they can give back to a prospect, because those prospects, answered their questions, is the demo. And so it prompted this question of, well, what other type of value could we arm our reps with so that after they ask those initial questions, they don't feel rushed to go right into the demo, right? Could you give an interesting piece of industry insight, or maybe it's a case study, or anything that helps somebody, that somebody's going to see as valuable, besides just defaulting to the demo. Because I think what we'll find when we are able to double click on this even more, is that a lot of the time, just because you've asked those questions doesn't mean that you've surfaced all the information that you need to fully qualify the op.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, you shouldn't assume that you're going to fully qualify the op or uncover all the requirements during a discovery call. I mean, it's a point in time, and you don't have unlimited amount of time within which to do it. And customers sort of gauging, okay, is this still worth my time, right? So, you have to sort of look at qualification and discovery as sort of an ongoing process throughout the various stages of your process. Mm-hmm. Because, once the customer learns more about what you're doing, they're going to learn more about what the requirements are and what they potentially could achieve and what their goals and objectives might be. Maybe they'll reset it. Once they learn you have certain capability, wow, we can do more with this than we thought. Well, our objective for this investment's changed. Mm-hmm. Well, you need to discover that, and you need to qualify against it, make sure that it's still something that you're the right fit for. I sort of refer to this, and I've written about this, sort of relative to Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, of the observer effect, right? The act of selling to someone changes them. So
you would hope so.
Yeah. So right. Otherwise, you're just going to lose the deal. But the fact is, you have to be sort of mindful of the fact that at all times that this is not a one-time event. And I think that's why you get the sort of 9 questions and done. We give people scripts, we give people playbook. This is the discovery playbook. If I ask these questions, I can check the box and say I've met the exit criteria for this stage. I can go to the next one, even though you haven't fully understood what the buyer wants.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that those, realizing that you only have, that you only have a certain number of questions before you're going to move on. The natural question is, well, how do you make sure your team's asking the right questions, right? That they're not wasting questions early on, that they're not digging into things that are not necessary, and really focusing on what is it that I need to understand at this stage to decide whether or not it makes sense to invest more down funnel, right? To try and advance it. Because one of the things that Trish Bertuzzi told me about discovery was, you're never going to have a more leveraged point to evaluate an opportunity than early on. Because once you decide to push that into stage 2, all of a sudden you're putting so many more resources against it, so much more time, so much more everything, that you better be sure. And so this is the question that we're really trying to focus on with our customers. How do we help you figure out what these key questions are? How do we make sure that you're getting all the information that you need early on? And then what are the right questions to be asking further down the funnel, so that you can either decide, do we put more into this, or is it not the right time? Let's push it off.
Well, and Trish has identified sort of the key points. As we have this whole sunk cost fallacy that people have to deal with, is that, once you've migrated someone to a new stage and you start to make that decision to invest more resources, if you get a stage further and then you say, oh, whoa, hang on a second, this no longer looks like a fit. Well, there's all this inertia that's been created to say, look, we really can't stop the ball at this point, right? We've invested all this money in them. I'm sure we're going to get this deal. And it's a huge cause of, opportunities in the pipeline that just never close. Because you're not going back, you're not continuing to ask the right questions throughout the entire process, and you don't have the guts to say, yeah, this one no longer fits, or our odds of winning this are no longer good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that actually surprised us with our data, because we obviously look at Salesforce data as well, is just how many deals never end up in closed lost, right? So they just they either advance or they just go quiet, right? And eventually maybe they get put into no decision, but it really just means no movement. And so if you think about all the energy that goes into pushing these deals further on that eventually just go stale, I wonder if you'd find that it has to do with the quality of the discovery early on and seeing if there really was a fit.
Well, I think so. I think absolutely you'll be able to trace that. I mean, and again, with the caveat that discovery sort of is going to go through the demo as well. It's going to go into, it's not going to stop. But yeah, there's something that you miss early on that gives you the opportunity to sort of say, yeah, these people are going to go ahead and make a decision, right? I mean, because that's really what you're trying to suss out in the discovery is, yeah, you want to know sure that they're qualified for the product that you're selling them, but you most importantly want to know that they're actually on a track to make a decision.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So this is one of the examples of some of the high level data that we put into dashboards for our customers. Just because if you do want to see, at a glance, hey, how are we doing in this part of our sales cycle? Then looking at discovery, question number one is how many discovery meetings are we having? Are we getting prospects talking during that meeting? Because obviously if it's a one-sided conversation, it's not a very effective discovery. And how good are the various folks on our team at asking these engaging questions? And then what are those questions? Because can we use them? Can we use the questions that our best reps are asking to sort of standardize and create a repeatable process around having good discovery, getting prospects talking, and then having better information to decide whether or not to pursue the deal further?
Yeah, no, I think for most teams that'd be valuable data because, so often now, even with sales training, supposedly state-of-the-art sales training methodologies, in discovery, they still have this whole idea about focusing on pain points. And, asking about a pain point is not an engaging question. I mean, it's a point solution without being redundant, right? So I mean, when you list out some best engaging questions you had and that you found through the research, and none of them were about pain points, right? It's about what you want to achieve, what the buyer wants to achieve, what are your goals, what are your objectives, right? And you're fundamentally in qualification, what you're trying to discover, what you're trying to understand is where they want to be at some point in the future, whether it's 12 or 18 months away, where they are today, and what they perceive it's going to take them to get from here to there. And if you understand that, that's what you're trying to find out in discovery. And the value they put in that and so on. And it's like, that doesn't have anything to do with solving some pain point today. It's like, where do you want to be? What are you aspiring to be? And your engaging questions, if you can bring those up into a dashboard, those types of questions are the ones that are going to fuel the reps to ask the right questions that engage people in conversations.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Wow. Okay. You've said that several times. I'm doing a great job today. So, we're sort of running out of time here. We're gonna have to have you back. We'll talk some more because we got a lot of things still to talk about. So, Roy, tell people how they can find out more about Chorus and connect with you.
Sure. So, if you want to find out more, just go over to Chorus.ai. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at Roy R. And I always love talking to sales leaders with strong opinions to get input on what we're building and how it would be helpful for you or your team. So looking forward to continuing the conversation. And Andy, thanks so much for having me on today.
Hey, my pleasure. And friends, thank you for spending this time with me today. Make sure you come back and join us again tomorrow. Another great episode of Accelerate. And until then, if you get a chance, really appreciate it. Go to iTunes, wherever you listen to this podcast. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave a review. Want to know what we can do to add value to this show for you. So thanks again for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.